The emergency room doors slammed open so hard they bounced back twice. A stretcher rolled in fast, too fast, with paramedics shouting over each other. A man in military fatigues was unconscious, bleeding from his side, his pulse barely holding on. Behind him, a black combat K9 moved in perfect sync with the gurney. No panic, no distraction, just focus. And then it happened. The dog stopped, mid-step. Every sound in the ER seemed to drop at once. Even the monitors felt quieter. The K9 slowly turned its head, not toward the injured soldier, not toward the doctors rushing in, but toward a nurse standing near the supply counter. She wasn't doing anything dramatic, just charting, calm, observing. Like she had seen worse days and stopped reacting to them. The dog took one step, then another, and then it did something no one in that hospital had ever seen before. It straightened its posture, lifted its head, and sat perfectly still, like it was acknowledging command, like it had recognized rank, a combat-trained military K9. Saluting a nurse, a junior doctor whispered, "That's impossible. He only responds to his handler." The senior physician snapped, "Remove that dog from the area." But the dog didn't move. It stayed locked on the nurse. The nurse finally looked up. Her eyes met the animal's, and for half a second, something passed between them that no one in the room understood. Something trained, something familiar, something buried. Then the overhead speaker crackled. "Who authorized her access to this patient?" a cold voice demanded. Cold voice. A man in a polished suit stepped into the ER. Hospital administration, authority, control. He pointed directly at the nurse. "You, step away from the case." The nurse didn't react. She simply said, quietly, "He's going into shock in under 2 minutes. If you move me, he won't make it." The administrator scoffed. "Who do you think you are?" The K9 growled once, low, controlled, warning. And suddenly, every doctor in the room hesitated, because the dog wasn't reacting like an animal anymore. It was reacting like it knew something they didn't. And then, the monitor flatlined. If this story already has you hooked, stay with it until the end. And if it moves you, hit like and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. Her name was Elena Marlowe. To everyone at Ridgeview Trauma Center, she was invisible. Not ignored because she was bad at her job. Ignored because she never fought for attention. She worked nights, took extra shifts, never complained. She did her job with precision that most people didn't notice until it was too late. But what people didn't know was that Elena didn't learn trauma care in nursing school. She relearned it. From something older, something classified, something she never spoke about. The hospital was understaffed, always one crisis away from collapse, and worse, controlled by external donors tied to defense contracts, which meant certain patients got priority and others got delayed. Elena had noticed patterns, wrong medication approvals, delayed trauma responses, missing intake records that reappeared rewritten. She kept quiet until today. The soldier in Trauma Bay 3 was getting worse, internal bleeding suspected, but the attending physician refused to authorize imaging. "Not stable enough to move," he said. Elena scanned the vitals. "No," she replied calmly. "He's stable enough now. In 6 minutes he won't be." The doctor frowned. "Are you diagnosing him now?" She didn't argue. She simply adjusted the IV line. Check his abdominal rigidity again. He didn't listen, so she did it herself. And what she felt made her stop. Not injury, not trauma, a rupture pattern, military blast signature, not listed in the report. She turned toward the admin glass room. The suited man was watching her. He nodded slightly, like he already knew what she would find. And that was the moment she realized this wasn't just a patient. He was evidence. The combat K9 reappeared outside Trauma Bay 3. It was no longer sitting. It was pacing. Fast. Focused. tracking something invisible. Then it stopped again, locked onto Elena, and for the second time that day, it did something impossible. It lowered its head. Not submissive. Recognizing, like it was confirming identity. A nurse nearby whispered, "Why is it doing that?" Elena didn't answer, because she was staring at the dog's harness. Military tag code, one she had seen before, years ago, in a place she never wanted to remember again. The hospital director arrived, confident, controlled. "This nurse is removed from the case immediately." Elena finally spoke. "You're delaying evacuation of a hemorrhaging patient for paperwork control." He smiled. "You're a nurse, not command staff." The word nurse was intentional, dismissive. But the dog reacted instantly, a sharp step forward, protective stance, between Elena and him. The room shifted, even the director hesitated. The soldier coded. Alarms exploded. Doctors rushed in, but Eleanor was already moving. "Stop CPR for 3 seconds, she said. "What?" a doctor snapped. "Just stop." They didn't understand, but they did it. Silence. She pressed 2 points near the ribcage, then repositioned the airway. "Now resume." The monitor stabilized. Pulse returned. A nurse whispered, "How did she?" No one finished the sentence, because they didn't have an answer. The dog sat again, but this time, it didn't move back. It stayed beside her, like it had made a decision. A military officer arrived at the ER, stopped instantly when he saw Eleanor. His voice dropped. "Ma'am?" The room froze. The director turned sharply. "Do you know her?" The officer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the dog, then back at Elena, and said something no one expected. "She's not supposed to be here." Elena didn't react, but her fingers tightened slightly, just once. Security reports arrived. The soldier wasn't a standard combat casualty. He was a protected extraction witness, and his injury wasn't accidental. It was a controlled takedown attempt. Someone inside the system had tried to erase him, and the hospital was part of the route, the same hospital where Elena worked, the same hospital that had been flagged years ago in a classified audit she had once contributed to before she disappeared from that world. Now everything made sense. The missing records, the altered triage logs, the pressure from administration. They weren't treating patients, they were managing outcomes. Then the power in trauma wing flickered. Emergency backup kicked in, security doors locked automatically, and every screen in the ER displayed one message. Access restricted. Federal Override Active A voice came over the intercom. "This facility is now under external investigation. Do not interfere with evidence processing." The director went pale. Elena slowly turned her head. The dog stood, alert, focused, waiting. And then, the soldier grabbed her wrist, weakly, barely conscious, and whispered, "They said you were gone." Elena froze, because no one in this hospital was supposed to know her past. Not her colleagues, not administration, not even federal records. The dog shifted slightly closer, and for the first time, it wasn't reacting to danger, it was reacting to recognition. The overhead lights cut out, emergency red lighting activated, and the doors to the ER opened again. But this time, the people walking in weren't hospital staff, they were military intelligence, and the first one through the door looked directly at Eleanor and said, "We found you." The words didn't echo. They landed, heavy, controlled, final. Elena didn't move. Neither did the dog. The military officers stepping into the ER weren't in uniform anymore, but they carried themselves like command structure had never left their bones. The hospital director stepped back instinctively. For the first time, he looked unsure. "Who are you people?" he asked. No one answered him, because they weren't here for him. They were here for her. Elena finally spoke. Quiet, precise. "You're in a medical containment zone. Identify jurisdiction," One of the officers paused. That pause mattered, because she didn't speak like a nurse, she spoke like protocol. The lead officer exhaled slowly. "Still operating like that," he said under his breath. Then louder. "Dr. Elena Marlowe, federal directive applies to you again." The room shifted. Doctors looked at each other. One whispered, "Doctor." The combat K9 stood up. Slowly. Not aggressive. Respectful. Then it did something that made the entire room freeze again. It lowered its head slightly toward Eleanor. Not a command, not training. Recognition. The handler behind it stepped forward. "That dog hasn't done that since Kandahar," he muttered. Elena didn't respond, but her eyes narrowed slightly, like she remembered too. A tablet was placed on the hospital counter. Live feed. Encrypted files unlocking. Timestamps appeared. Names. Redacted military medical logs. And then, a match. The soldier in Trauma Bay 3. His file was flagged. Witness protection active. Extraction compromised. The hospital director went pale. "This is a medical facility, not..." The officer cut him off. It was part of the operation route. Silence. That changed everything. Elena finally stepped forward. She looked at the screen. Not surprised. Confirmed. "So it wasn't a battlefield injury," she said softly. "No," the officer replied. "It was a cleanup attempt." A nurse dropped her clipboard. The sound was too loud in the silence. Elena turned slightly, and for the first time, her calm cracked just enough to show memory. Not fear, history. One of the junior doctors whispered, "Why are they calling her Dr. Marlowe?" The answer came from someone behind him, a senior medic who had just arrived, because he had recognized her. His voice was low. She was part of the K9 Medical Integration Unit. Another pause. Then, the program they shut down after the Kandahar incident. Elena didn't confirm it. She didn't deny it. But the dog took one step closer to her, like it understood the name. The officer tapped the tablet. New file opened. Video, security footage. Hospital corridor. Same hospital, different night. And there she was. Elena. But not in scrubs. In tactical medical gear. Working beside military K9 units during a classified field extraction. A doctor whispered, "That's impossible." The officer replied, "It was classified. Until now." Eleanor finally spoke again. Flat. Controlled. "You reopened a sealed program without telling the field operators." The officer nodded, and someone used it to move protected witnesses through civilian hospitals. Silence dropped again. Because now it wasn't just medical negligence, it was operational corruption. The hospital intercom crackled. Not internal staff. External override again. But this time the voice was different. Calm, cold, male. "If Dr. Marlowe is present, extraction authorization has been revoked." The officer reacted instantly. Locked down all exits. But it was too late. Security monitors flickered. One camera feed went black, then another. Someone inside the hospital was shutting the system down. The K9 changed posture instantly, no longer calm. Scanning. Tracking. Then it stopped. Locked onto corridor. "See." Growled once. Elena noticed immediately. "They're inside already," she said. The officer looked at her. "How many?" Elena answered without hesitation. 3, minimum." The soldier in Trauma Bay 3 suddenly moved. Weak voice. Barely conscious. "They found me." Elena leaned in. "Who?" His eyes barely opened. "Not hospital staff." Pause. "Contractors." That word changed everything again. Private military logistics, cover operations, data control. A technician ran into the room, out of breath. Security system override wasn't external. Everyone turned. He hesitated. Then, it was initiated from inside medical administration. All eyes slowly shifted toward the hospital director. He stepped back. "That's absurd." But Elena had already moved. She picked up the tablet, scrolled once, then stopped. You signed access protocols for the contractor group. The director froze. Not denial. Recognition that she had proof. She turned to the officer. Evacuate patients from West Wing. They're not here for the soldier anymore. The officer nodded immediately, because now she wasn't just a nurse, she was command adjacent again. The dog stood beside her. Perfect alignment. The lights flickered. Emergency power struggled. And then, every monitor in the ER switched simultaneously. A single live camera feed appeared. Parking structure. A black SUV engine running. And inside, a man watching the hospital. The officer whispered, "That's not one of ours." Eleanor stared at the screen. Very quietly she said, "No, that's who I used to work under." Silence. Then, the SUV headlights turned on and started moving toward the emergency entrance. The black SUV stopped exactly 40 meters from the emergency entrance. No hesitation, no speed adjustment, like it already knew the building layout. Inside the ER, every screen still showed the live feed. The officer's voice was sharp. "Lock all internal doors, now." But Eleanor didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the screen. The dog stood beside her, completely still, waiting, like it understood the moment had shifted from response to confrontation. The SUV door opened. A man stepped out. No badge, no uniform, just calm authority. The kind that doesn't rush because it assumes it already owns the outcome. He looked at the hospital like it was already his space. Then he said into a comm device, "She's inside." Elena exhaled slowly. The officer looked at her. "You know him?" A pause. Then Elena replied, "Yes." Short, controlled, too controlled. The soldier in Trauma Bay 3 suddenly spoke again, stronger this time. "You were there?" Eleanor turned slightly. He continued, "K9 Recovery Unit, Kandahar Breach." That name hit the room harder than anything else. A nurse whispered, "That was never publicly confirmed." Eleanor finally looked down, not ashamed, not emotional, just remembering. The officer beside her spoke quietly. "They erased that program after the extraction failure." Eleanor corrected him. "After the betrayal." Silence. The dog shifted closer to her leg. Not leaving. Never leaving. Security cameras flickered again. This time, floor 2 corridor. A contractor team moving in. Fast, coordinated, not hospital staff. The officer snapped, "They're already inside the system." Eleanor didn't react immediately. Then, "They're not here for the patient anymore." A pause. "They're here for containment cleanup." The elevator doors opened. The man from the SUV stepped out, now inside the hospital, unstopped, unchallenged, because internal locks had already been overridden. He looked directly at Eleanor. "You weren't supposed to resurface," Elena replied calmly. "You shouldn't have reused the extraction route." He smiled slightly, like she had confirmed something for him. The combat K9 suddenly stepped forward, not aggressive, protective, positioned between Elena and the man. The man tilted his head. Still responsive to her, he looked at Elena. That animal was never cleared for retention after Kandahar. Elena replied, "He wasn't the one who failed clearance." That hit differently. Even the officer turned to her. The officer triggered full data access. Every screen in the ER changed. Military archive file unlocked. Video. Field mission logs. Names redacted. But one line visible. Operative Marlowe maintained full control of K9 recovery breach evacuation under live fire conditions. A nurse whispered, "She wasn't a nurse then." No, she wasn't. The contractor leader stepped closer. "You're supposed to be archived," Elena responded. "You don't archive living witnesses." He narrowed his eyes. "You were never meant to come back into civilian systems." Elena looked at him directly. "You shouldn't have brought the same network into hospitals." Silence. Because that was the real mistake. The officer shouted, "Full federal containment activated. Doors sealed. Emergency protocols locked." But the contractor team was already inside the system layer. One of the monitors flashed, "Admin override denied," then another, "External control active." The hospital wasn't fully under federal control, and that meant it was still compromised. Elena stepped forward, slow, controlled. She placed her hand on the emergency console, typed a code. No one saw it coming. Even the officer froze. "Where did you get that access?" he asked. Elena didn't look at him. "I never lost it." All screens switched, contractor network exposed, financial routes, patient rerouting logs, witness transport schedules. The soldier in Trauma Bay 3 was not just a patient, he was a live trace node in a larger cover network. The hospital director collapsed into a chair. This will destroy everything," Eleanor replied. "No," a pause. "This will only expose it." The combat K9 suddenly walked forward, straight past Elena, straight past the officer, straight toward the contractor leader, and stopped. Perfect stance. Still. Then, it barked once. Sharp. Final. A command tone. The contractor froze for half a second. That was all it needed. Security forces moved in. The contractor leader tried one last move. "You think this ends here?" Eleanor replied. "No, I think it already ended when you reused my corridor." He hesitated. That hesitation mattered, because federal units entered behind him. This time fully armed, fully authorized. No override left. Hours later, the hospital was quiet again. Not normal quiet, after-storm quiet. The soldier was stable, the network was exposed. Multiple arrests confirmed. The system partially collapsed. Elena stood near the exit. The combat K9 sat beside her, no longer alert, just present. The officer approached. "You could return," he said. Elena didn't answer immediately. She looked at the hospital once, then said, "I already did my return." Outside, morning light. The SUV was gone, the threat contained, patients were safe, but systems always leave scars. The dog leaned slightly against her leg, not because of command, because of choice. Elena stepped forward, slow, calm, not a hero, not a symbol, just someone who refused to ignore what others buried. As she left the hospital gates, her phone vibrated once. Unknown number, no message, just a new secure file request, still open, still active, still unresolved.